the next 90 minutes, and this is where we'll be bringing you the 7th in the lecture series that the ANC has been holding since January, commemorating, honoring, celebrating the past presidents of the governing party, the African National Congress. This, of course, being the 100th year since the ANC has been in existence. And this afternoon, the lecture will be given, or delivered rather, by the president of the ANC, Mr. Jacob Zuma, and that will be happening in about half an hour's time. For a bit of an introduction, though, to today's proceedings and to the life and times of Nelson Mandela, here's a brief insert prepared for us by Tebogo Alexander.
History in the making, the release of Nelson Mandela, at the time the world's best-known political prisoner. Mvezo, near Mthatha in the Transkei, is the birthplace in 1918 of the man who personifies the struggle for liberation. After matriculating at Hilton, he attended Fort Hare, where he became a member of the Students' Representative Council, and in 1940 he took part in a student strike for which he was expelled with his friend and comrade, the late Oliver Tambo. Mandela ended up in Johannesburg, and in so beginning his rise in the ranks of Congress, from Youth League Secretary to Party President. He joined the African National Congress in 1943, and a year later he helped found its Youth League. The nationalist victory on the platform of apartheid in the 1948 all-white elections all but assured the youth won the day at the 1949 elective conference. This period also coincided with the opening of the country's first black legal firm by Tambo and Mandela, who at the time was both Transvaal ANC president and the party's deputy national president. As national volunteer-in-chief of the Defiance Campaign, Nelson Mandela traveled the country organizing resistance to discriminatory laws. He also played an important part in leading the resistance against the Western area's removals, the introduction of Bantu education, and popularized the Freedom Charter adopted by the Congress of the People in 1955. During the 50s, Mandela was banned, arrested, and imprisoned many times. He was one of the 156 accused in the mammoth treason trial, where he conducted his own defense. In 1960, a Pan-Africanist Congress anti-pass protest resulted in the deaths of 69 unarmed protesters in Sharpeville, including women and children, and the eventual banning of the liberation movements. A year later, the ANC had established its military wing, Umkhonto Wesizwe, which under Mandela's leadership launched a campaign of sabotage. He left the country for military training in Algeria, as well as to arrange training for MK recruits. On his return, he was arrested and, despite conducting his own defense, was convicted and jailed for 5 years in 1962. While serving this sentence, Mandela was charged in the Rivonia trial with sabotage and sentenced to life imprisonment. Nelson Mandela's statement during the trial, including telling the court, "prepared to die for his ideals," is a classic in resistance law. His jail, Robben Island, would become a center of learning, with Mandela himself organizing political education classes. On his eventual release 27 years later, Nelson Mandela would lead ANC negotiations for a new democratic South Africa. Mandela and the then President F.W. de Klerk received the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize. He joined millions of fellow blacks to cast their first ever votes on April 27, 1994, marking the formal end of apartheid. The African National Congress won the poll.
So help me God.
And in 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratically elected president. He retired from public life to the land of his birth in 1999. Seen here last month, Nelson Mandela still remains one of South Africa and the world's best known and loved heroes.
Well, members of the ANC here in Limpopo, as well as members of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, together, of course, with leaders from other provinces. They're in a good mood and in high spirits, ready for this afternoon's lecture that is going to be delivered by the ANC's president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, in about half an hour's time from now. Well, joining me now is Ndileka Mandela, who is going to speak on behalf of the family. Tell us very briefly about Dada's state of health. When last did you see him?
I saw him roughly about 2.5 weeks ago. And
how was he looking?
He is glowing. That's the way I can describe him. I mean, he's in good health, he's glowing, and hasn't lost his wicked sense of humor.
Well, this, of course, being his birthday month, part of the reason why the ANC has departed from the norm, which has been the norm since January, where they have taken the leaders in chronological order. But they've made an exception this time around to say, because it is Dada's birthday month, let us therefore honor him this time around.
Yes, for me, I really commend them for doing that, because Granddad is a person that has lived for humanity, and for the ANC, his organization, to honor him like that is really something that we as a family commend very much.
What have you guys lined up privately as a family for this birthday?
For the birthday, well, it's going to be, we're going to sit with him and spoil him as a birthday boy, and fuss around him, so to speak. And that's what we do. And he wakes up and he goes down. We go and do our 67 minutes, which this year we'll be doing at a nearby clinic that he donated in 2008. And after that, then we'll go and have lunch with him and sit with him and just fuss around him. He likes, to hear the buzz around him and, children running around. Although sometimes, he'll look at us and not comment, but he'll say one thing. To say, okay, I'm part of the conversation, I can follow the conversation, and that's it. Yeah.
Are there specific things he has said to you? Look, during my birthday month, no matter what happens, you guys must go there, and there, or do this, that, and the other thing.
He's a very progressive man and liberal man in that manner, because, oftentimes when we had asked him how he wants us, his grandchildren and his children, to honor him, he said it is up to us to honor him.
He didn't shout any orders.
No, he doesn't. To honor him in the way that we see fit. And I think the onus is upon us as his grandchildren and children to sort of honor his legacy, the legacy of peace, the legacy of eradication of poverty, and the legacy of seeing that every child has an education.
So what will you, as a family, be doing this month? I would imagine that, you are here today,
yes,
and a lot of other family members, I'm sure, are going to be dragged into other sorts of...
yes.
What are the sort of things that the family members will be involved in?
Personally, I'll be involved in this clinic. When I visited Granddad, like I said, about 3 weeks ago, what I said to him, I visited the clinic to see what they are in need of. And I saw that they don't have a fax copier. They have to send somebody to town to just for a simple fax and copying their files. I then roped in some businessmen in Johannesburg to say, okay, you need to donate this, and also sort of paint the clinic and make it look nice. Their maternity wing is not. I'm a nurse by background, so it's something that I feel passionate about. Their maternity wing is not working, for instance, simply because a borehole pump broke. I don't know how long ago. And now people that can be at the clinic are being sent to other clinics in the surrounding area of Kuno to go and deliver, which is not good. So this is what I will be doing, going to see at the clinic, clean it up, and also see what else they need over and above what we'll be bringing on the day.
No, beyond his birthday month, there is the call of making each day a Mandela Day. What are you as a family doing in that regard?
I will talk about me personally. Granddad studied at Clarkbury. And I've seen recent pictures, with the 94 schools that were launched by the Minister of Education, that Clarkbury is in complete disrepair. I spoke to the principal and will be doing something with the businessman from Johannesburg, Mr. Tebiela, in terms of refurbishing that, and painting the school maybe the following week, And also their boarding house has been closed down because it's in complete disrepair. We will, take over some of the programs and rolling them forward. And what I want to do personally going forward is also to look at the schools, because Granddad, when he retired, he would call businessmen, and I know he became notorious to say, when Madiba calls you, you're going to part with a lot of money. And he would call businessmen to build clinics countrywide. For me, what I would like to do is to go to those schools and see what it is that they need currently, because yes, those schools were donated. I'm sure by now there's things that they need going forward, and also carry on the programs that he had been doing.
I mean, this campaign has gathered momentum, and it's growing and growing, and has been doing so for all these years. Have you, as a family, perhaps together with him, or maybe in collaboration with others, thought of maybe taking the campaign to a completely different level? Any thoughts around maybe doing something radically different from anything that we've seen so far? I know that it's not a good thing to mess with something that's working, but any thoughts in that regard?
Well, in medicine, you said if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But anyway, yes, we have, collectively, we have different things that, we plan to sit as a family to say, okay, now that this is an international day, it's a global thing, let's take it to new heights. We are talking about doing something like that as a family.
I'm sure we'll hear about those pretty soon. Thank you very much for talking to us. Ndileka Mandela, well, talking, of course, giving us some insights into the health of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, who is at home in Kunu, but also giving us some sense of what they as family members are doing or thinking of doing to honor this great man. Well, right now we're going to go inside where, of course, as I said earlier, the proceedings are already underway. Let's take a look at what's happening inside the hall, where President Jacob Zuma will be delivering the lecture in a short while. Joining me now is Mr. Matole Moteka, who is, of course, the convener of ANC and EC members deployed in this particular province. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Vuyo, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Well, first I want to start by asking, well, a lot has been said about the level of security that has been deployed here and the tensions that Limpopo represents. What is the ANC's view or take on that?
As NEC deployee, I've been working in this region. I've been addressing regional meeting with the structures. I have not seen any tension in this region. In fact, even the songs that are sung here don't indicate that. But, security had to be tightened, because we are not only dealing with the president of the ANC, we are dealing with the head of state. And you cannot gamble with the security of the head of state. But I can assure you, you will see as we progress, there is no animosity in this region against the leadership of the ANC. We're working.
Well, this, of course, being the seventh in this lecture series, some people are saying actually the level of security is a bit tighter than we have seen it since January. And that is really what they were referring to.
You see, we have a regional leadership. And the regional leadership said repeatedly that they are not going to take chances because they don't want anybody to embarrass the leadership of the ANC like it happened in the Western Cape. So this is a normal precautionary measures. There's no state of emergency here. You can listen to the music there. They are singing in Venda. that we want the president, we support President Jacob Zuma. So there's no hostility in this region against the president. The security measures are normal precautionary measures.
Let's talk now about the decision to bring the lecture in Limpopo, whereas previously the presidents were brought in chronological order. In January, it was the first President General of the ANC, and then the second one in February, and so on and so on. We've broken away from the norm this time around. What was the reason for that?
You will know that July month is a special month for President Nelson Mandela. He was born on the 18th of July, 1918, and July is a Nelson Mandela month. And also, you'll know that he's the father of the moral regeneration movement. July is the moral regeneration movement. So this is a befitting occasion for honoring our icon Nelson Mandela during this month.
Well, I'm asking this in part because when I posted on Facebook that we'll be covering this lecture live this afternoon, there were people who were asking why wasn't this done in Kunu instead of Limpopo.
South Africa is one country. Nelson Mandela is a former president of the entire country. When during the struggle, Nelson Mandela also, among other places, when they called him a Scarlet Pimpernel, came to this area and hid away from the police here because he never recognized himself as a Kuni person. He recognized himself as a citizen of South Africa, a leader of all the people of South Africa, and today we are proud even to say a leader of the South Africa in the world.
Now let's talk very briefly about that iconic person. Lots of people suggesting that slowly but surely the ANC is deviating from the kind of ANC that Nelson Mandela would have loved to see. And those noises got a bit louder, for example, in the run-up to the summit that took place in Johannesburg last week around social cohesion.
There is nothing further from the truth. If you can look at all the speeches of President Zuma in Parliament and outside Parliament, he always refers to the moral vision of the ANC, dating back to the Bill of Rights of 1923, the African Claims of 1943, the Freedom Charter, and he has done a great deal to consolidate that legacy of the ANC, to make sure that all of us in the organization takes a cue from there. But you see, people must distinguish between rogue elements within the organization. If there are some dissidents who are not towing the party line, who are ill-disciplined, you don't drag the whole organization into that mess and say the organization has deviated. The organization has not deviated. There are individuals who deviated, and the organization is dealing with such individuals.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Dr. Matsole Motshekga, the member of the ANC NEC and also the convener of the ANC deployees in Limpopo. Well, some scenes we're seeing inside there. You're watching live pictures of what is happening right inside the hall right now. We don't know what is going on just yet, but we saw ex-members of the Umkhonto Wesizwe as well as security personnel taking a guy outside. We don't know what he did or what he said, but we'll bring you an update on what happened, what exactly happened there. He is being whisked out outside of the hall at the moment, and as you can see and hear that the singing has stopped for a while because of that particular scene, the violent pictures you just saw right now. This is a live broadcast of the ANC's lecture in a tribute to Nelson Mandela, who I'm sure would not have loved to see the sort of pictures that you saw earlier. Of course, we don't know yet whether it's a confirmation of the things we heard earlier. Since we arrived here yesterday, there have been all sorts of rumors, people talking about people who are planning to disrupt or are planning to make a statement here this afternoon about their unhappiness about a whole range of things that are happening or that they believe are happening within the ANC. But let's go back inside just for another look at what is happening inside that hall. And later on, we'll be bringing you up to date with what exactly happened, what was happening with the pictures that you saw earlier. You are indeed watching a live broadcast of this lecture that is supposed to be given by President Jacob Zuma, the president of the ANC, any time from now. You can see that some of our camera people are right inside trying to get to that story to get a sense of what exactly happened. But by the look of things, some NEC members unmoved or unperturbed, and some people there trying to relax a bit after the scenes that you saw a short while ago. This is a live broadcast from a few kilometers outside of Thohoyandou. This is a church hall where President Jacob Zuma is supposed to deliver a lecture in honor of former ANC president and former president of this country, the first president of South Africa, a democratic South Africa, Nelson Mandela. The leadership of the ANC here in Limpopo are here in full force, and so are members of the ANC's NEC deployed in Limpopo. We spoke earlier to Dr. Matole Motshekga, whom you saw just now, and he was talking about the tensions that have been reported on. You would have heard SABC radio stations this morning. You would have seen in other media people talking about the tensions. We asked Dr. Matole Motshekga about. We don't know yet whether the violent scenes we saw that ensued a little earlier were part of those reported tensions. But we will be bringing you that story a little later. We will be asking some of the people who were inside as to what it is exactly that was happening there, what that man did, or what he may have said that led to him being whisked out in that fashion. There's our news camera down. Well, if you've just joined us, you're watching a live broadcast. We're outside Thohoyandou in Venda. This is where President Jacob Zuma is scheduled to speak. He will be delivering a lecture in honor of former ANC and the former president of our country, the first president of a democratic South Africa, Nelson Mandela. Well, a short while ago, you would have seen those violent scenes where someone was being kicked out and thrown out of the hall. Apparently what actually happened was when people were singing, some in the crowd started doing the change, a signal which you often see in ANC rallies these days. We saw it the other week when the ANC was having a policy conference at Galaga Estate in Midrand. Well, some of the people were talking about another term, while others were talking about a change. So that apparently is when a bit of fighting ensued. We are still speaking to some of the witnesses who were there, the people who may know what it is exactly that happened. But for now, it's what I actually told you, that there were other people who were showing support, for President Jacob Zuma, while others were talking about, were making a signal that he should be changed. But that scene was quickly sort of put under control after we saw there, I think it was members of the ex-members of MK who kicked some guy around. But outside here, not far from where I'm standing, there were also some scenes. One guy trying to kick one of the security guys who tried to run away. Some people were affected by tear gas. Some of them are the people you see walking out right now, because apparently some tear gas was thrown or sprayed at the people to try and diffuse that situation. So, yeah, a bit of a hectic few minutes here, but not quite perhaps to the level we saw in Cape Town in February, but nevertheless some scenes that we dead sure the ANC wouldn't have wanted to see. We are going to try and bring you some of the people who may give us a sense of what actually happened, and perhaps more importantly, what is going to be done to make sure that the situation is put under control. Well, speaking of that, we are being joined right now by the Minister of Police, Mr. Nati Mtetwa, who was inside when the scenes you saw actually took place. Minister, welcome to the program.
Thank you for your...
Tell us, I mean, you were inside. Did you see what actually transpired?
Well, people were singing different songs until one group started hurling insults to the leadership.
What sort of insult?
Well, they were singing derogatory songs, basically. And then MK people and the security forces were there to take them out. So they were taken out.
Now, I mean, a lot was said about the level of security at this particular gathering. Can you confirm that security was beefed up quite significantly for this particular gathering?
Well, it happened like that. Actually, with the security, the force levels depend on what information is there. And the leadership in the province here, together with the national leadership, has made a clarion call that people should come here respectfully to come and listen to the ANC leaders talking, particularly the president. And if people have any other ideas, they shouldn't be anywhere near here. So we've just seen that now, and we've emphasized that such acts won't be tolerated. I mean, this is a clear indication.
Well, some would say, but what then did you expect? It's a confirmation of what people have been saying all along, that tensions in this particular province have reached a boiling point. Is that what you were also told prior, which then gave or led you to reinforcing the security that was deployed here this afternoon?
Look, tensions and competition can never constitute a problem. But moving out of track, out of the boundaries, out of what is accepted, will definitely not be tolerated. I mean, you have been following up things, particularly from the NGC to the last conference we had about 2 weeks ago, that the ANC leadership has to be firm on issues of discipline. I mean, that can't be tolerated. It can't be a talk, continuous talk. Somewhere we need to say we have arrived, and this is the action we are taking. So I think slowly but surely those rotten apples will see that there is no such place. There is a place for contest, and that is accepted. But really, people should do things within the boundaries of the movement.
Now, in a province where a lot has been said about how the so-called culprits are in fact supportive of the provincial ANC leadership in this part of the country, to what extent were the leaders of the ANC in the province, the provincial executive, for example, cooperating with the police as well as other state security agents or agencies rather?
Well, the leadership in the province here has, as I said earlier on, together with the national leadership, called on people, on cadres of the movement to act with restraint, to act in a disciplined fashion as true cadres of the movement. So from that point of view, I don't think there's any difference between the leadership of the ANC, because the different layers of leadership know exactly what is happening, but also the province itself. The majority of people who have come here, they are here in a jolly mood. They are here to celebrate. This is the centenary of the ANC. In fact, we shouldn't be talking about ill discipline or discipline for that matter, because here it's a celebration. It's a centenary of the movement, but most importantly, we've dedicated this month as the ANC to the lives and times and every contribution our leader Madiba has made to humanity as a whole, but to South Africans in particular.
Who I'm sure wouldn't have wanted to see the sort of scenes we saw earlier.
Definitely not. I mean, those people, should have known what kind of a leader Madiba was. Very radical, militant, but very disciplined cadre of the movement. And that's how we grew throughout the echelons of the movement to be where he was as he left the office, as it were. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Well, the Minister of Police, Mr. Nathi Mthethwa, talking to us about the scenes that you will have seen earlier, where at least one person was kicked after a fracas broke, and the tensions were reaching or had reached a boiling point inside that hall, where President Jacob Zuma is supposed to speak any minute from now, delivering a lecture in honor of President Jacob Zuma. Now let's go inside for a look at what is happening in there. Well, you're watching live pictures of the ceremony that's already gotten underway. We're expecting President Jacob Zuma, the president of the ANC, to deliver a lecture in honor of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, the past president of the ANC. The governing party has been hosting these lectures since January, honoring its past presidents. We started in the Free State back in January, and this, of course, being July, the 7th month of the year. It is here in Limpopo, in Venda, just outside of Thohoyandou, and that is where the lecture will be delivered any time from now. You're watching a live broadcast coming to you from Venda in Limpopo. People you are seeing there, it's the ANC's provincial chairperson in the Eastern Cape. Next to him in the cap is Dr. Matolo Moteka, who is the convener of ANC NEC members deployed in Limpopo, and Billy Masetla, former head of intelligence, who you see coming out there. Lots and lots of other ANC NEC members, as well as provincial leaders of the ANC in other provinces. Dr. Zweli Mkhize from KwaZulu-Natal is also here.
Oh, Chihoyo, it's you.
And thanks, how are you, Prof? Well, if you just joined us, you're watching a live broadcast. We're coming to you from Venda. We're right outside Thohoyandou, and this is where President Jacob Zuma will be delivering a lecture in honor of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela as a past president of the ANC. Joining me now is Dr. Mushe Nkondo. Prof, how are you?
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
And thanks for inviting me.
Well, Venda has a very rich history, certainly in as far as activism of the ANC is concerned.
Yes. And even I want to go much further than that. If you remember the battles that King Makado fought here in the 80 years, and that tradition has carried over You also remember that the University of Venda here, in 1994, when it looked for the first chancellor of the university after independence, it went for Comrade Walter Sisulu. And this same university conferred the degree of Doctor of Philosophy on Comrade John Chitenje. And historically, if you look very carefully at the history, particularly of the MK, there's a very, very rich history here. And there are still, I'm told, comrades who are still here, buried somewhere, and not accounted for. So historically, this is a very, very fervent place. And also the Communist Party, if you remember, had its first conference here after independence. So it's a very, 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 very intense place politically, particularly in the traditions of the ANC.
Why is that, though? What is there in the makeup of the people of this particular area that sort of draws them closer to activism?
Particularly the leadership, going back to Mercado himself. And also there is something in here that is the entrepreneuring spirit here is much more intense than anywhere else in the country. When I was vice-chancellor here for 11 years, almost every staff member, whether you are a secretary or a messenger or a professor, you had an enterprise somewhere. So deeply ingrained in the culture of the place is a very, very strong, and also a very, very strong, sense of place, a sense of locality. Most of the people who come here, even when they go to Cape Town or go to Durban, have a very strong sense of belonging to this place. So it's a very, very strong indigenous consciousness, and that's part of his strength and his contribution to national unity.
Now, what we have seen recently, of course, is that it has also been one of those provinces where if one follows or observes modern-day politics within the ANC in particular, it's been the area where the divisions within the governing party are perhaps a little more pronounced than they are in other provinces.
But in context, in terms of electoral power, this place has polled on the average in the last 18 years, not less than 97% at each election cycle. So it is still to be proved. I think there's a lot of talk in the media and in the discourse that there's division. But I still want to find out empirically whether in the next election the voter turnout will be less than. Yes. And my sense that this is part of the vibrancy of the place. Is part of the urge, the surge for democracy, and the youth here. I was vice chancellor here for 11 years. The youth here are very intense and very assertive, not because they are irresponsible, but they have a very intense sense of their own obligation to themselves, and also a very intense sense that they are fully fledged citizens and deserve the rights and responsibilities and benefits of citizens. I don't think there's anything extraordinary about this place. The youth everywhere, it may be more intense now than elsewhere, but the pattern is the same. It's the same democratic surge that goes back to 1976.
Which probably actually explains the scenes people saw during this broadcast a little earlier, where young people who were making all sorts of signals about President Jacob Zuma then had to be thrown out, and there were violent scenes as a result.
Yeah, but that also, must see that this country must get used to the dynamics of age transition. When you move from one to another, the dynamics there tend to be explosive. Particularly the time when the youth, are unemployed, most of them. Particularly the time when there's a crisis in the economy. One expects that, but one should not overread the meaning of those events. It is part of a democracy.
Do you think we are, as a nation general, do you think we're overreading situations, or we take ourselves perhaps too seriously?
I think we have a way of mistaking events for issues. You see, events may have episodic character. They may be sensational, but the issues may not be that sensational.
Where do we draw the line?
The draw the line is the extent to which the leadership is able to contain. I think it's important that the test of the ANC that the leadership must be able to contain the surge, allow it to express itself, at the same time draw limits for its expression.
As a scholar, I mean, a week, hardly a week after we had started, the government, led by the ANC, convened a National Social Cohesion Summit.
Yes.
Now, when people see the scenes, the sort of scenes we are seeing today, to what degree do you think they can entertain the possibility even of national social cohesion when the governing party itself actually demonstrates the sort of intolerance, if you like, that we saw? We saw members of the same party kicking each other because someone perhaps held a different view or showed a gesture that somebody else did not like.
Yeah, you know what, I think we're again overreading that. The assumption behind leadership is that there are tensions. If we didn't have tensions, conflicts, conduct in this country, there will be no need for leadership. The very fact that we have tensions, it's a reason for that. So I think one should see this as part of the dialectic of power, and that even the dialectic of moving from one moment in history to another. There's nothing extraordinary about that.
I mean,
even intolerance, everywhere in the world, even the most advanced, the most developed, there are moments when particularly the youth are in conflict with the elders. You find in the US, you find it in Southeast Asia. I was in China a couple of years ago, where there's the same kind of turmoil. It is part of the difficulty of what I would call the earlier age transitions, where the youth have greater expectations than the system can offer, and where the elders are trying to find ways in which they can accommodate high expectations. But it's part of the dynamic, the dynamic.
And you think we do have the leadership that will make sure that those tensions are managed and do not actually spill out of control? In
the last 18 years, we've had 5 presidents. Each one of those presidents spent at least 50 years of his life in struggle. They came up with the ranks at a very, very difficult time in the history of this country, and they were brilliant. You can't tell me now that in much less risky times in the last 18 years, these people have become poor leaders. There's something in the objective forces, in my opinion, something in the macroeconomic policies that make it difficult for our leadership to transform society. Instead of worrying about the moral psychology of leaders, let's worry about the nature of the economic policies, whether the policies themselves can deliver enough jobs.
To someone who then argues that in fact part of the responsibility of our leaders is to actually steer us in that direction, and that's what they are there for. In other words, they are the ones who should be taking leadership roles in steering our discourse towards the direction that we should be taking as a country, as a nation.
Yeah, but you're aware, that in the ANC, the president is an equal among equals. Conference.
That's why I was talking about leadership broadly, and I wasn't specifically referring to the president. I was just talking about the leadership.
Yes. Conference makes decisions. The president he participates in conference, but it does not make decisions. Not even the NEC makes decisions. It's the broad church of the ANC that makes decisions. And if there's something wrong in our public policies, we have to look into ourselves, go back to conference and correct them. Fortunately, we were at conference the last 2 weeks, and there we identified gaps or discrepancies in our public, and we have committed ourselves to making changes come December this year. So if there's something, in my opinion, something that drastically wrong with our economic policies, and I think the ANC comprehensively has the responsibility to look into itself and correct that.
Do you think it did exactly that 2 weeks ago at Galaga Estate?
Yeah, I think in the political there was a commitment for a radical shift in policy. There's a commitment to make sure that the state acquires enough power to make decisions that will benefit the people. I think that commitment is there. We'll see how it pans out in December.
Prof, it was good to have you on the program.
Thanks very much.
Well, Professor Nkondo, a veteran of South African politics and the former Chancellor of the University of Venda here in this province of Limpopo, where we are today. If you've just joined us, you're watching a live broadcast. This is where President Jacob Zuma is supposed to deliver a lecture in honor of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, part of the ANC's centenary celebrations that have been going on since January. Each month, they choose a past president of the ANC and then do a lot of rallies and gatherings in honor of that particular person. You're watching a live broadcast coming to you from just outside Thohoyandou in Venda in the province of Limpopo. The scenes you're seeing there are of the people who are gathering inside the hall. This is a church hall. The scenes of where they were clashing. Well, the leadership of the ANC, it looks like, is now making its way in the dash. And I'm sure the president will.
Next on Afzonders.
I look at my beautiful wife and I assure her that I'm telling the truth, but I'm not.
Ricky and Wong are on a surrogate adventure, whilst Chris and Kate are in a race against time to find their son. Afzonders, Tuesday 7:30, SABC 2.
No, man, no, look at the sentence. See you, Aniki Fita. You blood how no, no better.
Is the law finally growing a pair? Streets of Mangaung, this Tuesday 9:30 p.m. only on SABC 2.
Dis die blom, dis die blou, dis Pasella vir jou. Ja, Woensdag maak ons weer so met 'n waterfokuspunt wat jy self kan bou. Die kuns van capoeira wat aanhoudende beweging verg. Paul de Tooi en Terence Bridget op 'n formele uitstappie. 'n Man wie se visie vir meer as 400 kinders musiek leer. Julie in ons tuin en kombuis en die oulike Namakappie se geskiedenis. Pasella, Woensdag 7:30 SABC 2.
Where we are, there's still scores of people who are waiting to be ushered in. I think proceedings, this letting people in was halted a short while ago because of the ugly scenes you saw earlier, where members of some of the people who were inside started making some gestures, from what we were told by the Minister of Police, Natim Tetwa, who we spoke to earlier, but also by our journalists who were inside. When people started making gestures, others asking for change of leadership, others asking for continuation. Well, President Jacob Zuma has just walked in right now, meaning that he will indeed be delivering his lecture any time now. If you've just joined us, you're watching live pictures of this lecture in honor and in memory of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, past president of the ANC. This being a continuation, a process that the ANC started back in January, where each month they choose a past president and rally around the name of that person. Let's go inside now. The chairperson of this particular session is about to get the proceedings underway.
Comrades Momo, very quickly bring the flame on stage so that we can start. Comrades Momo and your team, wherever you are, make sure that the flame is on stage. Comrades and headlines, we don't have time. Comrades, friend headlines, can you please bring the flame on stage? We have to move with speed. Comrades, more. The flame handlers, can you please bring the flame on stage? Allah, Allah, ANC, Allah, Allah. Allah, Allah, ANC, Allah, Allah. Viva African National Congress, viva. Viva President Jacob Zuma, viva. Pele, galokunda la batho, pele. The flame has arrived, comrades. We can take our seats. And I think the choir should be ready. The choir, can you please come on stage? The choir, can you quickly come on stage? Shall we all be on our feet as we'll be singing Inkosi Sikelele Africa?
Sikelele Yesu ufedise dintwali matwenyego Murena buluka sichaba sa Yesu ufedise dintwali matwenyego Usibuluke 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 Sichabasa Yesu Sichabasa Yesu Usibuluke Morena Usibuluke Usibuluke Sichaba Usibuluke Sichabasa Yesu Sichabasa Africa.
Mandela, thank you very much, choir, for leading us in singing in Nkosi Sikelel in Africa. Without any waste of time, like I said, we're going to have to move a bit faster. I would call upon Bishop Isaac Takada to come and give us an opening prayer. Shouldn't be a long prayer, but a very important prayer.
Karabe. Dedwe ma tapama na musikezwi ripano panda chipaku chao palondonia tabe. Rokandiwa nga ofisi kurani ya inoshango la Afrika Shipembe. Simwanga rokandiwa nga citizen number 1 wapano shango la Afrika Shipembe. Rima panda chipaku chao richi obe iwa honga iwe hako mfiswa nga muntu. Nga iwe wafula futi au nani angalifaa. Wapakucheza au nani angasema. Wadolisa thoma mfura washega chinwelo chawe chadara zvabudina zvuya zvitomutovera matubani awe muchiro hawe uyarabera ngatina na Jesu politolisa president washu ave na wisdom yo andisokatano na kabili okono uranga panda rushaka la Afrika Shipembe ngatina na Jesu Kristo rialibu amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop Takata, for giving us the word of God by way of a prayer. Comrade President, Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Mandashe, members of the NEC present here today, convener of the subcommittee to Limpopo, Comrade Matole, provincial chairperson of the ANC, Comrade Castle Matale, and other chairpersons from other provinces who are here. I've seen Comrade Zwelim Kize and as well as Comrade Masuali. And the delegations that you are leading from your respective provinces. The Secretary of the ANC in the province, Comrade Soviet, Comrade Florence, Deputy Secretary, Comrade Pingi, Comrade Treasurer, and the Chairperson of Vembe Region, Comrade Matibe, and your REC. Leaders of Alliance, the SACP, COSATU, SANCO, ANC Veterans League, ANC Women's League, ANC Youth League, YCL, SASCO, COSAS, and members of Umkondo Wesizwe. Delegations from various structures of our movement, business leadership present here today, leaders of academia, from many institutions in the country, the Mandela family, and those that are accompanying you, your majesties, our kings and queens who are here, traditional leaders of our people, ministers and MECs, faith-based organizations, mayors and other office bearers, comrades and colleagues, delegates from branches of the African National Congress, coming from across the length and breadth of our province. We have crossed the rivers and the rivulets to be here to come and listen to this important centenary lecture by our president. Comrades, all in one, you are all welcomed to this important meeting and function of the African National Congress, the centennial commemoration of President Nelson Mandela. Thank you very much for coming. Shall I therefore, without any waste of time, call upon the provincial chairperson of the ANC, Comrade Castle Matale, to come and give us welcome remarks. Over to you, Chair.
Amandla! Amandla! Viva President Jacob Zuma, viva! Viva President Jacob Zuma, viva! Long live President Jacob Zuma, long live! Viva President Nelson Mandela, viva! Viva President Nelson Mandela, viva! Long live President Nelson Mandela, long live! 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 Thank you very much, Comrade President, Secretary General, Program Director, Deputy Chairperson, the Provincial Secretary and PC members present here, the convener of NEC deployees in our province, Comrade Matule Motseha, and other NECs present here, my colleagues, the chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, Comrade Zweli, and the chairperson of the ANC in the Eastern Cape, Comrade Pumla, and all other PEC members from different provinces who are here, all protocol observed. We are behind time. We want to apologize to you, to the people of the province and the country, that we got delayed because the program was a bit heavy. We had to greet kings of this province and chiefs of this province so that the president announced to them that he is here to deliver a very important lecture on Comrade Nelson Mandela. We would like to apologize for having arrived late. Time is not on our side. The program director have welcomed everybody. There is no need for me to stand here and waste another minute. We must give time to our president, President Jacob Zuma. You are all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Castle Matale, our provincial chairperson of the ANC. Shall I therefore call Ndileka Mandela on behalf of the Mandela family to come and give us some remarks? Over to you, Sisi.
Amandla. Matla. Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished guests and members of the African National Congress, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, thank you very much for inviting me to this occasion that marks the Nelson Mandela Centennial Lecture. It gives me great pleasure to be here on behalf of the entire Mandela family, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I must also extend a very gratitude from the Mandela family for taking care of Granddad. And I must let you know that he is in good health. He is glowing. Being amongst his ancestors gives him great pleasure. And smelling the fresh air of Kunu always keeps him in good humor, and he hasn't lost his sense of humor. Recently, when my cousins and I were in Kunu with Granddad, when the Centenary flame was presented to him, we were all part of a special moment. That in the year that the ANC turns 100, Granddad is still alive. He was able to receive the torch, touch it, and hand the mantle to his next generation, his children and his grandchildren. It was such a special moment when that centenary flame was presented to him.
and to see the sparkle of that flame in his eyes as we all reflected on those years of struggle and the long walk to freedom that we all share. And as I looked at that centenary flame, I reflected on my granddad's words when he said, human goodness is a flame that can be hidden, but it can never be distinguished. And we all remember that there were times when the ANC flame was hidden, was imprisoned, and forced underground. But through all those dark days and years, the flame was somehow kept alive. And today, that flame burns proudly across our land. When Granddad was released from prison in February 1990, he knew that our march to freedom was irreversible, that nothing could stop our dream from a free South Africa coming true. But he also said he knew that it would be no easy and short-term task to eradicate the poverty and the inequality apartheid had created. When he was inaugurated as our first democratically elected president on May 10, 1994, he pledged to undo what he called the legacy of our divided past. And I quote, "South Africans must produce a South Africa that will reinforce humanity's belief in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul, and sustain all our hopes for a glorious life for all. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster must be born a society of which all humanity must be proud." On that day, he pledged to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. We all have a huge mountain to climb in this country in order to overcome the crippling poverty which the majority of our people have to live with every day. If we're to really make sure that the child without a proper roof over her head, not enough nutritious food to eat, parents who are absent are unable to give a future to a child, then it is up to each and every one of us to do something. As he said at the end of his single term as a president, we constantly need to remind ourselves that the freedoms which democracy brings remain empty shells if they are not accompanied by real tangible improvements in the material lives of millions of ordinary citizens. It is good to have good policies, but when people on the ground cannot enjoy the fruits of these policies, it is a bad thing. 10 years ago, while honoring Comrade Walter Sisulu at his 90th birthday, Granddad said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." And as my granddad reminds me when we talk together when I visit him, he always says, South Africans have a tremendous capacity to join hands when facing difficulty. And when we recognize that we have more to gain from working together than from fighting each other, when we recognize that there is more that unites us than divides us, it is that unity that sustained us in the dark days of the past. It is that unity that will sustain us in the future. That is Granddad's wisdom. That is his Madiba magic. That we as his children and grandchildren will always cherish. His Madiba wisdom and legacy will be cherished by a new generation of South Africans. That Madiba's wisdom and legacy will also be cherished by young people all over the world. When he was finally released, he was driven by a dream of rectifying all of that. He dreamed of giving children a better life, and he would commit himself to achieving a time when the children of this land would be liberated from poverty, liberated from violence, and liberated from hunger and disease. As the ANC enters its second century, I hope we can recommit ourselves to ensuring that my granddad's dream of a better life for all will one day come true. And now is the time. I thank you.
Can we give a big round of applause? Thank you so much, Ndileka Mandela, for those words representing the family. Comrades and fellow South Africans, we are continuing with our work today as part of really celebrating the life of the father of the nation, Tata Nelson Mandela, the founding father of our democracy, and as well as the icon of the nations of the world. His life is worth it, and that is why we're here today as the African National Congress to come and continue with our work, importantly so as we mark yet another beginning of the second century of our existence. Shall I therefore call upon the Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, to come and perform his work. Amanda!
I'm given a task that is quite difficult to present the President of the ANC to deliver the memorial lecture of Comrade Mandela. It is difficult because I can be tempted to deliver a memorial lecture of the President. Let me remind you that 2012 is the centenary year of the ANC, and today we are presenting the 7th memorial lecture in this centenary year. Therefore, this year is a year for learning. It's a year for us to be reminded of our history. It's a year for one of the most brilliant leaders that the ANC has ever produced, and the icon of our struggle, Comrade Nelson Mandela. It is going to be presented by the President of the ANC, Comrade Jacob Zuma, fitting in that role because not only because he's the sitting president, because his own credentials in the struggle qualify him to deliver this memorial lecture of Comrade Mandela. Comrade Jacob Zuma is basically an embodiment of all the structures of the movement. He has been a trade unionist. He has been a leader of the Communist Party. He has been a commander of Umkhonto weSizwe. He is a veteran of the ANC. He is a leader of the ANC, tried and tested. An organic and self-made intellectual, real-tempered in steel. I am presenting to you the President of the ANC to deliver the memorial lecture of President Nelson Mandela. For the duration of this lecture, you are going to call him Professor Zuma, because you can't deliver a lecture if you're not a professor, Comrade President.
Kaina. Matimba. All power. All power. Thank you very much, comrades. Comrade Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, the chairperson of the ANC in the Limpopo province, Comrade Castle Matale, the Mandela family with us, members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, family members of all former ANC presidents, Your Majesty, the King, and other kings who may be present, traditional leaders who are here and religious leaders, tripartite alliance leadership, comrades and friends, fellow South Africans, I'm deeply honored, proud, and humbled to be here with you today as we honor our beloved national hero and international icon, President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. On the 18th of July, Madiba will turn 94 years old. His birthday has become an international celebration declared by the United Nations as International Nelson Mandela Day. This gesture confirms what Madiba means to the world. As we share him with the world, we as South Africans remain truly proud to call him our own. Inside our country, even those who were and who are still fundamentally opposed to the ANC and who fought tooth and nail to keep South Africa a racist pariah state now claim Nelson Mandela as their own. Such is the power of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, a unique and great statesman who is able to win over even his enemies. Today, we celebrate Madiba in all his capacities. We honor Madiba, the revolutionary, the first Umkhonto weSizwe commander-in-chief, the first volunteer-in-chief of the ANC Volunteer Corps, and the architect of the M-Plan. We honor Madiba, the symbol of our struggle and of the triumph of South Africans over apartheid and colonialism, and Madiba, the first president of a free and democratic South Africa. Comrades and friends, before going through some highlights in the life of this accomplished revolutionary, allow me first to thank the millions who stood by Madiba and the ANC throughout his incarceration here and abroad. I would like to borrow from the words of President Oliver Tambo in Venezuela on the 24th July 1983, where he said, and I quote, "Our enemies condemned Nelson Mandela. You are honoring him. They entombed him alive. You are making him part of our living presence. They silenced him. You have caused him to be heard. We thank you for that," unquote. He was born at Mvezo on the 18th of July, 1918. Like most early ANC presidents, Madiba was educated at Clarksburry and Hilltown, and later went to Fort Hare, where his legendary friendship with President Oliver Tambo was formed. His journey to mass political work began with his acquaintance and friendship with Comrade Walter Sisulu in Johannesburg, where he moved to from Mvezo after running away from an arranged marriage at home. Their friendship deepened, and Madiba seldom made important decisions without consulting Comrade Sisulu. Madiba also, at this time, met and married his first wife, Evelyn Marse, who was a cousin to Comrade Albertina Sisulu. The relationship produced 3 children, Magaziwe, Makatu, and Tembi. Madiba worked with his friend and comrade, President Oliver Reginald Tambo, running a law firm that helped many black people in conflict with the apartheid laws. They were both founding members of the ANC Youth League, which was established in 1944. The ANC youth was impatient with the leadership of the time, whom they felt were too gentlemanly in their approach to the struggle. After the 1948 election victory of the Afrikaner-dominated National Party, the Youth League drew up a program of action calling for more militant action, such as strikes, boycotts, and defiance. It was adopted by the ANC in 1949. The manner in which Madiba carried himself during this period teaches us that the most effective revolutionary ideas are magnetic, not cohesive. He attracted people like a magnet through persuasion. His amicable manner, coupled with his exceptional organizational skills, made him the obvious choice to be the ANC's volunteer-in-chief during the Defiance campaign. Madiba set the country in a rolling mass action against various measures such as passes. The ANC had also joined forces with the Congress of Democrats, Natal Indian Congress, and the Colored People's Congress. Thus began the forging of a united non-racial assault on the apartheid colonial regime. The colonial and apartheid regime responded to the Defiance campaign with repression and brutality. Over 8,000 people were arrested for defying unjust laws of apartheid. Madiba and 150 others were also arrested and later acquitted. The ANC emerged stronger as a mass militant movement after the Defiance campaign and grew its membership to over 100,000 members. In recognition of his outstanding contribution during the Defiance campaign, Mandela was elected president of both the Youth League and the Transvaal region of the ANC at the end of 1952. He later became a deputy president of the ANC. That same year, the ANC leadership called on Madiba to prepare a strategy document on how the ANC can operate underground given the extent of the repression at the time. Dubbed the M Plan, Madiba's strategy proposed the reorganization of the ANC branches into small cells to enable the leadership to maintain dynamic contact with the membership without calling public meetings. It was called M-Plan, named after him. In other words, Mandela Plan, because he drew up the plan. Indeed, the brutality escalated, necessitating new survival tactics for the ANC. The Congress movement had gained ground around this time. Madiba was also instrumental in the preparations for the drafting and adoption of the Freedom Charter by the Congress of the People in 1955. On the 21st of March, 1960, a total of 69 people were massacred in Sharpeville, leading to local and international outcry. The ANC and the PAC were banned on the 31st of March, 1960. And the regime imposed a 5-month state of emergency. The ANC went underground. In 1961, the leadership of the ANC took the decision to adopt the armed struggle and to create Umkhonto weSizwe, MK, the nucleus of a National Liberation Army. It was not a decision taken lightly. Mandela explained the reasons in his statement from the dock. This is what he had to say, and I quote, "At the beginning of June 1961, after a long and anxious assessment of the South African situation, I and some colleagues came to the conclusion that as violence in this country was inevitable, it would be unrealistic and wrong for African leaders to continue preaching peace and non-violence at a time when the government met our peaceful demands with force. This conclusion was not easily arrived at. It was only when all else had failed, when all channels of peaceful protest had been barred to us, that the decision was made to embark on violent forms of political struggle and to form Umkhonto weSizwe. We did so not because we desired such a cause, but solely because the government had left us with no other choice." Unquote. The rules were clearly defined. It was to sabotage strategic outposts, to scare away foreign capital and weaken the economy, to force the government to talks. Mandela was the first commander-in-chief of Umkhonto weSizwe. He left the country illegally and visited Ethiopia and Algeria. He received his military training in Algeria. In launching itself, MK issued its historic manifesto with these timeless words, and I quote, "The time comes in the life of any nation when there remain only two choices, submit or fight. That time has come to South Africa. We shall not submit, and we have no choice but to hit back by all means within our power in defense of our people, our future, and our freedom." Unquote. On the 16th of December of 1961, MK launched a bombing campaign against government targets. As Commander-in-Chief, Mandela skillfully coordinated sabotage campaigns. He also raised funds for MK abroad and arranged for training for combatants of MK. In March 1961, in response to the pending declaration of South Africa as a republic, the All in Africa National Convention Council conference was held in Pietermaritzburg. Mandela afterwards wrote to the then Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd on behalf of the council, informing him that the African people would embark on a mass action against the declaration of South Africa as a republic on the 31st May 1961, if it went ahead. They also called for government to convene a national convention of all South Africans to draw up a new constitution. On the failure of government to respond, a general strike was called. On the 5th August 1962, Mandela was arrested near Pietermaritzburg after living on the run for 17 months. He was charged with organizing the general strike in 1961 and leaving the country illegally. The letter to Verwoerd featured prominently in Mandela's 1962 trial. It was in this trial that he made his profound statement on the judiciary, in the epic statement on the partiality of the South African judiciary, saying, "I feel like a black man in a white man's court." He said, and I quote, "In a political trial such as this one, which involves a clash of the aspirations of the African people and those of whites, the country's court, as presently constituted, cannot be impartial and fair. In such cases, whites are interested parties. It is improper and against the elementary principles of justice to entrust whites with cases involving the denial by them of basic human rights to the African people." Unquote. Madiba also eloquently outlined what drove him to fight for freedom. And I quote, "In their relationship with us, South African whites regard it as fair and just to pursue policies which have outraged the conscience of mankind and of honest and upright men throughout the civilized world. All the good things of life are reserved for the white folk, and we blacks are expected to be content to nourish our bodies with such pieces of food as drop from the tables of men with white skins. Whatever he himself may say in his defense, the white man's moral standards in this country must be judged by the extent to which he has condemned the vast majority of his inhabitants to serfdom and inferiority." Unquote. On the 25th October 1962, Madiba was sentenced to 5 years in prison. His wife at the time, Comrade Winnie Mandela, and his first former wife, Evelyn, were left alone to fend for his children. Comrade Winnie was later banished to Brandfort and suffered a great deal of repression after many detentions. Comrade Winnie became an important link between Madiba, sorry, khona lento ekhohlela sawula endlini. Between Madiba and the ANC, and was an inspiration to the oppressed masses of our country because of her fortitude and determination in the midst of adversity. While Tata was imprisoned, police arrested the MK High Command on the 11th July 1963 at Lily's Farm, Rivonia, north of Johannesburg. Madiba later joined Rusty Bernstein, Raymond Hlaba, Ahmed Kathrada, Andrew Mlangeni, Govan Mbeki, Walter Sisulu, and Elias Mutwaledi for the Rivonia trial. Bram Fischer, Vernon Barenge, Joel Joffe, Arthur Shackleton, and George Bezos were part of the defense team. Madiba's historic statement from the dock became an exposition of the reasoning behind the struggle for liberation and the methods that the ANC had chosen to adopt in the face of repression and the closing of all avenues of peaceful engagement. He closed his statement with these famous and inspiring words, and I quote, "During my lifetime, I've dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I've fought against white domination and I've fought against black domination. I've cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Unquote. All except Rusty Bernstein were found guilty and were sentenced to life imprisonment on the 12th June 1964. Madiba was in prison on Robben Island, where he remained for the 18 of his 27 years in prison. Life was no doubt hard. Prisoners were segregated by race, with black prisoners receiving the fewest rations and poorest. Political prisoners were kept separate from ordinary criminals and received fewer privileges. Madiba performed hard labor in a lime quarry with other prisoners. Madiba relates how, as a D group prisoner, the lowest classification, he was allowed one visitor and one letter every 6 months. Letters, when they came, were often delayed for long periods and made unreadable by the prison censors. Prison was also emotionally draining, especially with regard to family issues. Madiba's mother passed away and he was refused permission to attend her funeral. 3 months after the death of his mother, his eldest son, Tembi, was killed in a car accident. Again, he was denied the right to attend the funeral of his child. Comrade Walter Sisulu comforted him during this trying period. Madiba also had to contend with the fact that his wife, Comrade Winnie, was imprisoned, and that his 2 youngest children, Zenani and Zinzi, were in the care of relatives and friends. He agonized for his children and his family. The first 10 years that Nelson Mandela and his fellow Rivonia trialists spent on Robben Island were probably the most difficult ones. They were isolated from the outside world, and it seemed that there were no struggles taking place outside their prison walls. However, despite a political lull that took place shortly after the Rivonia trial, the struggle continued. The Wanki Sipolilo campaigns were launched in 1967 by Umkhonto Wesizwe and the Zipra forces. The Durban strikes took place in 1972 to 73, bringing pressure to bear on the apartheid state yet again. The first batch of prisoners who were sentenced to shorter prison terms began to leave the island. Their spirits were not broken. Many of them rejoined the underground struggle once freed. News of the freedom of Mozambique and Angola in 1974 and 1975 also revived the hopes and to political prisoners. Then the turning point took place in Soweto in June 1976 when students rebelled against apartheid education. The struggle was reignited. MK received a fresh intake of committed young revolutionary cadres. After the Soweto uprisings, the name of Nelson Mandela would never be forgotten. His name became synonymous with the struggle with community organizations in Soweto and elsewhere, linking daily struggles with the release of Nelson Mandela and all political prisoners. The ANC in exile mounted a campaign against the apartheid regime. President Oliver Tambo's powerful and well thought out and planned international campaign was highly visible and successful. He was able, assisted by Comrade Josiah Jele, Comrade Johnny Makatini, and former President Thabo Mbeki as respective heads of international affairs of the ANC at different times. They operated under the leadership of Alfred Nzo, who was Secretary General of the ANC then. In March 19 1982, Madiba was transferred from Robben Island to Pollsmoor Prison, along with other senior ANC leaders, Walter Sisulu, Andrew Mlangeni, Ahmed Kathrada, and Raymond Mhlaba. In 1983, internal mass resistance received a major boost with the formation of the United Democratic Front. And in 1985, the establishment of COSATU. Various formations came together under the banner of the UDF, mobilizing women, youth, churches, traditional leaders, and every democratic formation behind the struggle. MK also carried out several operations during this period inside the country. Around the same time, ANC activists were murdered inside the country. The regime's defense force also undertook raids in Botswana, Lesotho, and Mozambique, killing unarmed combatants and civilians. Under these pressure and intense pressure that we had, in February 1985, then President P.W. Botha offered Mandela freedom on condition that he unconditionally rejected violence as a political weapon. You'll also recall that he wanted him to be released to the Transkei, which Botha called his home. President Mandela spurned the offer, realizing a statement via his daughter Zinzi saying, and I quote, "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts." Unquote. The first meeting between President Mandela and the National Party government took place in November 1985. He met the then Justice Minister Kobi Kutsi in Fox Hospital in Cape Town, where Madiba was recovering from surgery. Over the next 4 years, a series of tentative meetings took place, laying the groundwork for further contact and future negotiations. But little real progress was made. In 1988, Madiba was moved to Victor Verster Prison and would remain there until his release. In 1989, South Africa reached a crossroads. The intransigent P.W. Botha suffered a stroke and was replaced as president by Frederick Willem de Klerk. What is remarkable about this period is the manner in which Madiba, a prisoner, negotiated the release of other political prisoners, once again demonstrating the capacity of Madiba to make things happen. In a document prepared for talks with F.W. de Klerk in December 1989, Madiba demands the release of 4 prisoners held on Robben Island: Mr. Matthew Meiwa, Mr. Alpheus Mtlalose, Mr. Anthony Xaba, and Mr. John Nene. They had been left behind when comrades Walter Sisulu, Raymond Mhlaba, and others were released. After a lot of behind the scenes maneuvering, on the 2nd of February 1990, F.W. de Klerk announced Mandela's release in Parliament. It was a massive victory for the ANC and its allies. We must emphasize that the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990, the freeing of other prisoners, and the unbanning of the organizations was not a miracle, as is commonly said. As Comrade Govan Begi correctly pointed out in one newspaper interview, and I quote, "The apartheid regime was forced into handing over power by the sheer weight of millions of people who had been mobilized into an irresistible force," unquote. This included pressure internally mounted by the mass democratic movement led by the United Democratic Front, and the international pressure led by the ANC in exile. There was pressure mounted by the anti-apartheid movement worldwide, the vocal demonstrations of ordinary citizens, and the sanctions and boycotts instituted by governments throughout the world. In addition, the Battle of Quito Cuiabá in Angola, where the South African Defence Force was humiliated, demonstrated the limits of their offensive capacity. More pressure was put on the regime by the adoption of the Harare Declaration. In mid-1988, the African National Congress had published the constitutional guidelines for a democratic South Africa. This was followed by the adoption of the Harare Declaration, a roadmap that was adopted by the Organization of African Unity, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the United Nations General Assembly. What is important also to note is that when Madiba had started discussions, he sent a report quietly to ANC headquarters in Lusaka, where he reported all the things he was doing and said he's reporting to the leadership. So by this time, a link between him and the organization outside, to be certain about that the thinking was together, had taken place. But also the struggle itself had reached a very critical point. It needed people who could think clearly and strategize. Madiba had strategized while sitting in prison and saw the way forward. Comrades and friends, no words can accurately describe that electric moment when Madiba walked out of prison in Victor Verster. We recall the sense of joy, tears, screams, and disbelief. The masses visualized their own freedom in the freedom of Madiba that day. nobody had believed that, in fact, Madiba will come out of prison. That is why that feeling. He addressed the nation for the first time from the balcony of the Cape Town City Hall. We acknowledge former President de Klerk reading the signs correctly during this crucial period in the history of our country. But it is also important that the signs that were being read were not the signs that just came by chance. The struggle had intensified. That led to these happenings. There were many factors that had taken place. Besides the Quito Cunaval, the socialist bloc, which was the biggest propaganda for South African government, had fallen. And therefore the excuse that if the ANC came to government, it would bring communism, had fallen away. So there were many factors that played themselves together to create a situation which led to P.W. Botha before de Klerk to say to his people, we'd rather continue the old way. So it is important to note that the circumstances had been, in fact, made to be ripe by the struggle itself. So de Klerk found a situation already which had been realized by those who were before him, holding on to a dream, quite only South Africa, hidden somewhere far away. The time had come to implement the assertions in the Freedom Charter that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it was based on the will of the people. Madiba reached out to constituencies inside the country and also to the international community. He addressed the United Nations and the Organization for African Unity and thanked the world for the support it had given to the struggles of the people in South Africa by declaring apartheid a crime against humanity. He assured Southern Africa that the era of invasions had ended and thanked them for supporting our struggle for liberation so fearlessly. Domestically, he had to start work to prepare for the restoration of the birthright of the black majority while managing white fears. A new constitution was needed, and the negotiations had to be formally started. Now it's important to underline this point, that as part of the work of Madiba, he had to do a few things in preparation for the restoration of the birthright of the black majority while managing white fears. The work of re-establishing the ANC inside the country began, and branches were once again formed so that the organization could lead the negotiations towards the non-racial and just future. In 1991, the ANC held its first conference inside the country. Madiba was elected as president, Comrade Walter Sisulu as deputy president, Comrade OR as national chairperson, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa as secretary general, and somebody else as deputy secretary general. One of the most sensitive decisions the ANC had to take was the suspension of the armed struggle, which angered MK cadres and many others within the organization. Just those who will remember, people were saying this leadership is afraid. Why struggle? We're committed to ending apartheid through a series of negotiations and participated fully in the Convention for a Democratic South Africa process, which began on the 20th December 1991. Working groups were appointed to deal with specific issues. For an example, the new constitution, the setting up of the interim government, the future of the homeland, time period, and they mounted a brutal low intensity war in black townships using Bantustan parties, the police, and other apartheid institutions. They fomented violence amongst members of the ANC and Inkatha Freedom Party in what is now KwaZulu-Natal. Horrific massacres took place, including vicious incidents of terror such as throwing people off the reef. Madiba was there to bring the nation together during these trying critical moments. That could have led to the civil war. While Madiba tried hard pressers, he was pushed over. At one point during the Codesa negotiations, F.W. de Klerk, who had attacked the ANC, accusing us of refusing to disclose the location of the arms cache and for keeping a private army. He said about F.W. de Klerk, who, by the way, had asked to be the last speaker, and yet he wanted to attack the ANC because he thought Madiba was not going to respond. When he finished speaking, Madiba, without talking to anyone, he just stood up and walked to the podium without consulting the director of the program. And this is what he said to de Klerk, and I quote, "Even the head of an illegitimate, discredited minority regime as he is, has certain moral standards to uphold. He has no excuse just because he is ahead of such a discredited regime not to uphold moral standards. If a man can come to a conference of this nature and play the type of politics he has played, very few people will like to deal with such a man."